Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Heltman. He is my co-host, Neil Meyer of the Front Office News, Rivals Cincinnati coverage site. A little bit of a bare bones operation this weekend. Maybe moving forward, we're not exactly sure what's going on with our technical apparatuses behind the scenes over at Bet Online, but we're bringing you the show as best we can here across the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Heltman of Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. And this week we have a loaded show to close things out. Baba Miller, the forward from FAU that has been on the radar for Neil Meyer and I for almost a month now. I've had the story written for weeks that Baba Miller would be the sixth addition to Cincinnati's transfer class, and that he is after committing on Thursday afternoon. We'll get to that and a little bit of a potential starting lineup bat around discussion between Neil Meyer and I. And then we'll get a quick break in the middle of the show and get to some dates and times that have come in for the Crosstown Shootout. We have a date for that, and we have a time for the Nebraska football matchup on August 28th. Plus, ESPN ranked the football off seasons and how well each program did in their off season among every power conference. And Cincinnati checked in at eighth among the 16 Big 12 teams. Discuss that to close the show. All that coming up on Bearcat Blitz after these quick messages across the Believe Network. Stick with us. Neil, getting into the meat of the show here, a big news drop on Thursday. We were waiting for it, we were anticipating it, and it finally happened in Baba Miller coming over to Cincinnati from FAU, 7 feet tall, 21-year-old Spanish power forward, is a dynamic option, not only on offense, but defensively as well. 11.4 points last season, 6.9 rebounds, 2.7 assists. So he's going to keep the ball pinging around Wes Miller's offense consistently. 55.4% effective field goal rate. That's very strong. Shot 33.9% from deep in his season this past season with FAU, sitting at roughly 7 feet to 6'11", 215 pounds. The front court rotation, Neil, has been completely redone outside of Halvin Zealot in terms of players that saw the floor in Cincinnati's front court last season. And now Baba Miller joins Jalen Haynes, Tyler McKinley, Mustafa Tiem, and Halvin Zealot in a front court that, Neil, has once again been upgraded and elevated talent-wise compared to last season and the season before that.
Yeah, Russ, it definitely has. And I think it's worth noting too. I think you and I talked about it. We're like, only thing missing for this roster is your stretch four, and that's what they got in Baba Miller. I mean, he is definitely your stretch four. And I mean, you're thinking back of what a lineup could consist of. Right now, you have Jizzle James, Day Thomas, Kirk Carissa, Sincere Harris, whoever might be that second point guard. And then you have Baba Miller, Mustafa TM, and then you have Sean Abayev as well, probably in the fold for your potential starting five. Could be a pretty filthy starting five for Cincinnati. And not only that, but a guy like Baba Miller is coming off a career year, averaged 11-7 at Florida Atlantic University this past season, has 1 year of eligibility left, but Russ, he has continued to make strides each and every year throughout his career. And this is a guy that's drawn a lot of upside and a lot of conversations throughout many college basketball analysts and scouts and whatnot. So overall, this is a big addition for Cincinnati, and it's a big one to be excited for, right? And respectfully so. I mean, anytime you have now a stretch four who shot 35% from behind the 3-point line last season, and Mustafa TM, who shot what, close to 30% in his lone season from three. Anytime you have those kind of calibers, guys that are 7 foot, able to step out, knock down a 3-point shot is going to be huge. But Russ, most importantly, I think this is the most size that Cincinnati has had in recent years there in the front court between the likes of Jalen Haynes, Halvin Zealot, Tyler McKinley, Baba Miller, and Mustafa Tiem.
Versatile guys that can play inside outside. You got Jalen Haynes, who's going to bring a really dynamic front court game to the fold in terms of his post up ability. And Cincinnati and West Virginia, according to evanmaya.com, the only teams in the Big 12 with six top 300 player ranking additions this offseason. And Cincinnati and Baylor are the only two Big 12 teams with two top 75 players from Evan Maya's rankings. It's good enough to get Cincinnati up to number 15 on 24/7 Sports overall transfer class rankings. It's all there, Neil. It is
Mhm.
all sitting there. Corey Evans has done his job. His work is nearly done. I imagine they're going to add probably one more scholarship guy, maybe two. There are three scholarship spots, three roster spots still available as we record this right now. So not nearly wiping the slate clean for Corey Evans, but he has given Wes Miller a ton of tools to work with in terms of these six recruits, these six commits that he's been able to get into the program. And now we see if Wes Miller, once again, with an even higher level of talent than he had last year when he had a worse season comparatively to than the one when you compare it to his first season in the Big 12, can he put the pieces together in the puzzle on the court, in games, in crunch time, in those high leverage crunch time moments that you need your players to execute in and you need your coach to be pushing the right buttons? The pieces are there right now, Neil, and it's just a matter of can they prove it in mid-January, in February, and in March? Because that's kind of where we're at with this team. It's similar to the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA. You're going to have to get really deep into the season for us to start believing in the Cleveland Cavaliers again after what we saw in this playoff run from them. And the Bearcats, same thing. They have to show that they can beat the top of this conference consistently in the dog days of the Big 12, Neil, for me to go out on a limb and say that they can dance to the second weekends or even go dancing at that this coming season. I will probably predict them to make the NCAA tournament with egg on my face again, like I have the last couple seasons, just because the talent is so overwhelming. But Neil, we've been bitten in the behind before with this coaching staff.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, like you mentioned, you look down on paper. I know last year around this time we were sitting there penciling in Cincinnati to be a potential NCAA tournament berth team this year, but unfortunately that was not the case. And I think it's safe to say right now, if you look down on paper, you could arguably pencil in Cincinnati for an NCAA tournament this season. But we know how things work. We've been in this situation before, and you can't put them in that situation, right? You have, like you mentioned, you have to find a way to win in crunch time. Your month of January, your month of February, these gauntlet of a Big 12 schedule. I know it's not going to be as daunting as last season where you were playing 20 conference games or going back to 18, but you're going to have to find ways to kind of win these Big 12 games, right? You can't have these losses to a UCF or a lower Utah or a West Virginia kind of teams like they had last year where they were expected to win and then you go in there and they barely score 50 points or 47, whatever it might have been in one of those games. But you got to find a way to get those tough and gritty wins. And that's where this roster rebuild comes into play because Cincinnati last year arguably lacked somebody who could take effort and show some kind of passion, especially on the defensive end. This season, looking
Vocal
out this
leader, I think,
roster,
is what we're looking for this season,
yeah,
Neil.
the
Who
vocal
is going to
leader,
be that
correct.
vocal leader? And there are a few candidates that can take that baton in this roster.
Yeah, you have three or four that just stand out just due to their resume. But right now, Russ, too, another thing to talk about with this roster reconstruction is they have a deep history, right? Some of these guys have been on three, four schools. They have the resumes, they have the experience. That's what Cincinnati desperately needed was somebody with experience within the Big 12 or within college basketball. And you look down at this roster, I think Ryan and I talked about it earlier this week. There's three or four different guys that they brought in on the transfer portal who have been at three to four different schools, which many people might think, oh, this could be a bad thing. But then in this kind of aspect, in the new era of college athletics, it's like, okay, that this could be a good thing for Cincinnati and something to look forward at more when the season comes closer.
Tying a bow on this basketball segment, Neil, Baba Miller coming to the team, a versatile talent at that, noticeably increased his three-point percentage from 29.3% in the previous season to 34.2% this past season at Florida Atlantic. Spent his first two seasons with Florida State. Not sure if Baba is going to start. It's a tough cookie to chew on here, Neil. When you look at the options to start and who is going to be that first five out there, it doesn't really matter who your first five is. It's who you close with. But this is where the headlines are made with the starting lineup. I would have a hard time seeing Jizzle James and Kirk Carissa not be a part of that starting lineup on top of a guy like I think Sincere Harris is just going to blow the coaching staff out of the water and be that go-to on-ball defender for your number one perimeter option on the other team. So I think it's going to be hard to keep him out of the starting lineup. And then there's the front court, Neil. Do you lean smaller and more shooting with a Jalen Celestine, or if Sean Abayev storms out of the gates like he could as a five-star talent, you give him that small forward option? Do you go bigger with a Tyler McKinley or a Jalen Haynes or a Halvin Zealot at the small forward position and or at the power forward position? Excuse me, Sincere Harris is going to play that small forward spot, and you go that route. Do you go bigger? Do you roll with Mustafa Tiem and Baba Miller as your kind of stretch everywhere? You can shoot the ball at all five positions with that mentality and that option there. It's going to be very interesting, Neil. I think we'll see Haynes and Tiem start together along with Harris, James, and Kirk Risa. But Day Thomas more than has a case to start. Jalen Celestine, I think, has a case to start. Baba Miller can make a strong case to start with the resume he's bringing and what impact he could bring in the summer immediately for the coaching staff. So there's a lot of different options out there, but I'd roll with my first guess as the starting lineup to be Kirk Risa, Jizzle James, Sincere Harris, and then Mustafa Tiem and Jalen Haynes as of right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think you're going to see a Jizzle James, a Kirk Carissa. The three position is where it kind of gets a little hairy for me.
Yeah, there's good
That's where
options.
you have plenty of options there. You could go Sincere Harris, you could go Sean Abayev, you can go multiple different routes,
You could
but
go super big with Haynes, Tiem, and Baba Miller as
yeah,
your
correct. And
three
that could
others
be a
front court
lineup
guys.
that we see at one point. But for me, I'm still thinking it's going to be Jizzle James, Kirk Carissa, or Day Thomas, one of the two there at the two guard. I still think you see Sean Abayev come in and start as the three
Yeah,
just to give you the pure elite scorer. And then the four, you could go two different ways. If they're trying to play small ball, or they trying to play more spread out offense, or they trying to go big, get you a bucket, depending on the matchup. But I think we're going to see Jalen Haynes play with Mustafa TM in your starting lineup.
they could switch this up. They could have 15, 16 different starting lineups and not due to injury, just because of how versatile this roster is and what the different matchups could bring game to game, night to night. Let's take a quick break here on Bearcat Blitz and get to the news and notes to close out the show. Closing things out here, Neil, on Bearcat Blitz. I'm your host, Russ Heltman of Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. He's my co-host, Neil Meyer of the frontofficenews.com, Rivals Cincinnati coverage site. And we have a kickoff time for the action against Nebraska to start the 2025 season for Cincinnati Bearcats football. 9 p.m., Neil, with my day job, I will not be taking in much of this game, maybe one quarter, if that, as those two. Actually, actually, never mind. I might be off that Friday because I have a bachelor party that weekend. So I might be taking in the whole game. That might actually work out perfectly. But for all those in Cincinnati that have the normal early morning Monday wake up for work, that's a tough kickoff time to say the least. 9 p.m. on ESPN.
Yeah, it's a really rough kickoff. But on top of it, it's going to be interesting, right? You wish that game would have been earlier, but you knew when the opportunity came to play on Thursday night in what is that, week zero, week one, whatever it might be, you kind of knew it was going to be a prime time slot. But a 9 p.m. kickoff here kind of sucks. But since that game got moved to a neutral site, which was already planned, then to a new neutral site. It's an 8 p.m. kickoff in Kansas City, which hopefully we'll be making the trip up to Kansas City to cover that game. But overall, I hate that kickoff time for Cincinnati, especially on a Thursday night, the week before Thursday night football, short week coming out of fall camp. I hate the kickoff time just because, like you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of people working. Kansas City, it's kind of in the middle of both schools, but I don't think you see many Bearcats fans there being a Thursday night and people having to work on a Friday. So it's going to be interesting, but I don't know, 9 p.m. kickoff time for local 9 p.m. local time kickoff for week one on a neutral site in prime time is never ideal for guys like us who cover the team essentially.
Right. And then on top of that, like you're filing your stories at 12:30, 1 a.m., nobody's reading them at that point. They're turning the game off and going to bed. So less than ideal to say the least for the coverage aspect of it, but they're trying to hit as many eyeballs as possible across all three or all four time zones, I should say. CBS Sports insider John Rothstein broke the news on Wednesday, Neil, that Xavier and Cincinnati taking their crosstown shootout from Saturday to Friday. The rare Friday matchup in the 93rd edition of the crosstown shootout. Cincinnati won last season 68-65. We don't have a tip-off time for this one, but I would imagine 7 p.m. Friday would probably be when it's going to be 6:30. But it's going to be 7. I would be shocked if they made it a 6:30, given how tight that is between rush hour and the start of the game. But it's going to be fun, Neil. I will not, unfortunately, be there. It'll be my first crosstown shootout missed on the beat. Got my buddies, one of my best friends' wedding that weekend, and so we might actually have one of the newer writers for the site cover that one. But a trip to Centos on Friday night, the rare Friday. I'd have to look. I didn't look this. I should have looked this up before I did the story, but a rare Friday night matchup in the crosstown shootout.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting, like you mentioned too. What time will this game actually take place? It's still to be decided. But Russ, I would hate, and I mean hate, for this game to be at 6:30 on a Friday night. Absolutely would hate it.
Right,
If this game
because
is,
that's when I say that because that's when a lot of the Xavier home games
yep, that's when the
have
Big
tipped
East
off.
plays most of their
Yeah,
times and everything. But I would hate it for that. And the reasons being is A, it's arguably the biggest rivalry in all of college basketball. But B, who else is going to be playing a big rivalry game on a Friday night? Your
right.
A10 schools, your
That's an
MAC
eight, that's a
schools,
that's an 8 p.m. tip that they should make right there. That should be an 8 p.m.
and that
tip.
should be a ESPN one, a Fox Sports one, whatever it might be. That should be your time slot. But if
Maybe
it's a
that's why they
six,
made it a Friday game to get that premier slot because there's not like you said there's rarely marquee college games on Friday night.
but if they do anything else outside of an 8 or an 8:30 tip off for this game, it's going to be disappointing in my opinion. Just only because not only if it's a 6:30 game, traffic in Norwood sucks. We all know this. Rush hour traffic in Cincinnati as a whole sucks. So getting there, getting fans piled into the Cintas Center, it's going to suck on that day. You're going to be rushing, you're going to get stuck. So hopefully they do right, make this an 8 p.m. game. But Russ, like you mentioned, I don't think there's ever been a crosstown shootout on a Friday that I remember either, which is
I can't
low
remember
key
one.
exciting.
Yeah,
Having a Friday night thing, Friday night crosstown shootout. If Cincinnati wins, you know where all the fans are going. If Xavier wins, you know where they're all going. But overall, I think it's perfect because you have the great opportunity right there on a Friday night prime time. It's going to be electric this year, Russ, and I'm ready. I'm ready. Hopefully, knock on wood, that Cincinnati goes in and gets their first victory at Cintas in nearly 25 years.
yeah, it hasn't happened this century. I don't. Oh no, 2000 I think was the last time it happened.
2001 was the last time.
Yeah, there you go. It's barely inside of this century. Last time they got it done. They got some momentum in this series though. That was arguably the one of the last big wins of the 2024-25 season, unfortunately, for the Bearcats. They had some wins in the offseason football trail in terms of bringing in Joe Cotton to the fold. He was one of ESPN's top 100 transfers, and I'm imagining a big reason why Cincinnati stuck into the middle portion of the Big 12 rankings by ESPN. They put them eighth as the eighth ranked team in terms of the best off seasons in the Big 12 during the 2025 run. Solid, I would say, Neil. They've once again elevated the baseline talent. They didn't have a ton of players exit the program. I think eighth out of 16 is probably right on the money where Cincinnati should be slotted in one of these rankings.
Yeah, I'm right there with you too. Because you look down on what they did. They addressed the positions they needed. They did bring in some big time caliber players, but you still have to win games to kind of prove people wrong, right? And Cincinnati is sitting at 5-7 last year. They were 3-9 the year before. So ultimately, until they can put that result on the field, they're not going to get ranked much higher in these early preseason rankings per se.
Right. And the biggest factor was shoring up an offensive line that had four of its five starters exit. You bring in Tarantayo, you bring in Joe Cotton, you solidify those two spots, and then you let the best men win at the other few. You trust your recruiting and your development under Nick Cardwell for those other few spots. I think that's very, very sound and a very sound way to do it. You get 60% filled by guys you can fully trust, either outside the program or already entrenched in the program. And then you fill the other two with developing players. And then receiver wise, Cyrus Allen, Caleb Goody, Jeff Caldwell, all of those guys that have come into the fold, Neil, will hopefully, for Bearcats fans, change the Brendan Sorsby deep passing equation. We talked about that. I mislabeled it a couple weeks ago, talking about the middle of the field passing game. It was the deep ball last year that was a big factor in why Cincinnati couldn't pull away in some of these close losses. 59.3 Pro Football Focus grade last season for Brendan Sorsby on 20+ yard passes, 28.9% completion rate. That's horrific. Not that you need to be completing 50% of your passes on 20+ yard throws. They're much harder to complete because they're farther passes. But Neil, you need to be around. I mean, adequate completion on those balls is like between 35 and 40%. If they got an average completion rate on those, then that's one, two, three, four, maybe five more touchdowns on the season, and arguably two or three more touchdowns here and there makes them a bowl eligible team. So they address the right pressure points, and I think they're set up to possibly go bowling this fall in what is going to be another pretty palatable schedule compared to the one that they went through in 2024. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Heltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. We will talk to you all again on Monday. Enjoy the weekend, everybody.